What's up guys, it's Drac, and this is the first Nerf blaster I've been excited about in a long time. It's not a tie-in, it's not a Halo blaster, it's just a Nerf blaster that seems like it could be really good. Let's get into it. This is the NERF Stormcharge. So I picked up my Stormcharge for 30 bucks at Walmart. It's the Elite 2.0 Stormcharged Wild Edition. Comes with 20 darts, which in this case is a double your darts as it has a 10-round magazine by default. And frankly, like, the price is right. At 30 bucks, it is effectively the Elite 2.0 edition of a Stryfe, and it comes with accessories. It's got a little suppressor, it's got a little stock. The accessories seem relatively cheap, but if we take inflation into account, if this thing performs anywhere close to a Stryfe, if this is the modern iteration of a Stryfe, this is going to be a really big deal. This is going to be the default flywheel blaster for a lot of competitive builds, a lot of super stock builds, a lot of HVZ builds. Like, the Stryfe is iconic within the hobby just because it's been molded and recolored so many times that you have a lot of ubiquity in terms of accessories and cages. I wore my Nyx shirt on purpose. Sold hundreds of Nyx cages for people to put mostly in Stryfes, a few rapid strikes, but if this is anything similar to that, then this is a really important review in terms of like, how good is this blaster stock? And then almost more importantly, we need to do a mod guide down the line where we break it down, put a kit into it, and figure out what its top end potential is out of the box. But for 30 bucks, let's review it in its stock form. This is the Stormcharge. It's got relatively good deco. It's not quite as clean as the Stryfe, but the Stryfe had some weird stuff going on too. In its grip, you've got the kind of wild Tiger stripe camo going on all over it. In the back, its main feature is that it wants you to know that it's a 4-in-1 blaster. It's got a suppressor, it's got a naked form, it's got a stock, etc. and so forth. That's really all it's talking about. Other than that, it's a Stryfe with a 10-dart clip. Let's not talk about that explicitly anymore. Let's start getting into the ergo and the aesthetics on both sides. See if we can't pop it out of its entirely eco-friendly cardboard package here. I assume that down in the base, we're gonna get some instructions that we don't explicitly need, but might be helpful if you don't already know that you have to pull a rev trigger and then a trigger to fire. But you get the darts over here. Now, interestingly enough, I think that this is where it's a little, is that just falling off? This is where it's a little different than a, wow, is that real? There's no retention on the suppressor. So as opposed to something like the Spectre, which is an old school 5-dart revolver that had one of the original suppressors, there's no detent on this. There's nothing holding it in place. So as you run around with it, it would have the ability to rattle. And it would be very difficult for it to fall off, but it kind of drives me crazy that they've got the detent for a lot of these accessories here, where the in-strike barrel would attach, and this doesn't have one internally or externally to hold it in place. But a standard in-strike attachment point is there. On this side, it's interesting because the Stryfe, on its label to camera side, had kind of a battery tray here that came off and was asymmetrical. They have not fixed the asymmetry problem. In fact, they've kind of added on the back here a battery tray that's almost tumor-esque on the side there. Now, this is the ugly side of the blaster. It's meant to have all of the warning labels. You can see where the motor end bells are coming off of the shell, so it looks really sleek in the open-faced packaging. But on the other side, the illusion kind of falls apart, and you see that they've put the jam door in here. This is, by the way, one of the world's least useful jam doors, being very, very small. And then they've got the battery tray kind of hanging off the side, and then the motor ports sort of exposed, which begs the question of, is it going to be possible to fit larger cans in here? Now, that's kind of a holdover from times past, and I don't want to get too into it without doing the mod guide, but once upon a time, we used to put 180 size motors instead of the standard 130 size motors in. And now there are so many good hobby motor options out there that you realistically don't have to worry about that as much. But if you were going to do an old school build with some serious 180 cans, you might be interested. The battery tray does work very well. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, and I assume it's not getting in the way of the pusher. Now, I mentioned in the review that this looks very rapid pistol-esque, but it only does that when you kind of take this and this off. And I think that the real determining factor of what makes it look like a rapid pistol is that it's got this built-in top rail, and the top rail is nice, but it's also got this sight that you can't remove, right? Now, the sight picture itself is pretty good, but it's also very, very small and gets all the way from the back through this open cutout up and into the rail and then out the front. So it almost disappears. It's an interesting illusion where you're like, wait, where's the tube connecting the two? And the answer is that it's the hollow space underneath the rail, which is actually a pretty novel design. Other than that, you've got, we'll discuss all of the features. Like I said, in the front, there's an N-Strike attachment point, which seems like it's good on the blaster, but not on the attachment point itself. You've got the top rail, which is nice. It's not a full top rail because it kind of has this angled bit up in here to accommodate that aperture. Then you've got what appears to be like a hand stop almost up here. It's not bad. Actually, it's pretty comfortable, especially if you have large enough hands that you can wrap your thumb around the top. Like, that's pretty good. On the back here, you've got, of course, the ever-present N-Strike attachment stock. A lot of people are using this now. And the nice thing about it is if you want to adapt it into a buffer tube top, you just get a buffer tube stock and throw that onto the N-Strike attachment. And there are adapters all over the place that you could pick one of those up. The stock itself, not unlike this, is not very good. It's doing this cheap kind of mold release pattern that Hasbro does, where you wind up with a skeletonized, almost hollow stock. And while the concavity on it is actually pretty good, I don't like the ribbed texture. It feels very Alpha Strike, very cheap to me. Your mileage may vary. In terms of the actual stock, this is thick enough and reinforced enough with the triangles in it that it's not collapsing under a ton of weight. In fact, I can't realistically squeeze it too terribly much. So, I mean, it's durable. It's just not aesthetically pleasing. I'd rather have a Lightning Storm stock, personally. As for the blaster itself, in full rapid pistol mode, you've got two sling attachment points, one down here and one over here. I think that this is really the only useful one because you would not want your bandolier attachment point interfering with your magazine at all. Now, the mag release is pretty tactile, actually, but it sticks out really far. If you like that, then it's good. If not, there may be room to design something a little subtler, a little softer, more of a paddle in there. It's also got pretty good retention overall. Very interesting. Then you can see that it has the usual Stryfe locks. This thing isn't going to rev, or I guess there's no mag lock? What's that lock for? What happens if I push the lock? Whatever, it has locks, they don't do anything. Go figure, maybe they're Velis locks. Holdovers from a bygone age. The grip itself is a little small, but not overall bad. If you have average sized hands, you'll fit comfortably. If you have size large hands, which is like your glove size, so to speak, you might stick into this bandolier attachment point a little bit, at which point I guess you kind of have to pick your poison. Do you want to interfere with your magazines or do you want to interfere with your grip? Now, as far as firing the blaster goes, this is an elite blaster, which means that we shouldn't be expecting the world from it in terms of performance, but as hopeful for the platform as we are for just having an affordable entry-level semi-auto flywheel kind of bare bones system. There's almost always been a semi-auto flywheeler on the shelf, but it's very rare to have one in the Stryfoid kind of package where it's got the attachment stock and it's got the barrel lug so that you could customize it however you want, really take advantage of the N-Strike history, which is, you know, a decade long at this point, and all of the various both in Hasbro plastic and outside of Hasbro plastic accessories that have been developed therein. There's an interesting VEF on the magwell, showcasing that both the magwell does not have runners inside. It might be one of the cost-cutting measures is that the magwell is the shell. I don't know what this cutaway is for. I don't really understand the purpose of it. I guess your magazine shows through and you can see one more dart. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But in firing through our 10-round magazine, we'll I can tell you that not as a hater explicitly, this trigger feel is weird. The rev trigger is one of the nicest I've ever felt, but the trigger itself has this kind of molding on it designed to give you something to wrap around. And while that part is okay, the trigger itself is very stiff. It feels like it's you're fighting something to push those darts into the flywheel system. And it's hard to say how I feel about it yet. I think that I'd want to play a couple of HVZs with it, really break it in before I give a full verdict. But I can tell you my gut check is that the Stryfe has a much smoother, much nicer trigger pull to it. Now, if you happen to be an Omega Gangster mode kind of player, there is a side rail on the Stormcharge, which is something that the Stryfe did not have. So, you know, if you're like an optic up top and then maybe a light on the side kind of guy, that could be exciting for you. I think that the shell will paint very, very differently. It's got a lot of these cutaways. This is a completely hollow aperture in here, and then this is hollow through here. But if you look at the molding on the product, and I want to be very clear, this is a little nitpicky of me. You can see in there that the mold quality is not very good. I have flash in a lot of these holes that are clearly designed to be open that are not. And I would have rather just had the indents with a solid behind them there. The same sort of thing is going on in here. You can see that there's ribs from the shell peeking through these holes where they needed structure, but decided that it was worth trying to get aesthetic and structure all in one, and it just kind of looks a little bit sloppy. But overall, I'm pleased with the product. I think that the price is right. Let's take it outside. Let's get a stock Crony on it. All right, guys, so we're out here with the Stormcharge. We got the chronograph going. We've got the... Don't question that. Just pay no attention to it. Let's put a few over the chronograph. 61, 62, 63, 59, 61, 66, 65, and taking that off doesn't seem to change too terribly much. Let's throw a few more in this magazine, and all I can say is that that's a little underpowered, truth be told. Like, mid-60s is sub the Elite 70 standard, so if this is going to be a competitive blaster, it's going to need a little bit of love just to get it up to that standard at all. Now, in the process of loading this, we've loaded some AccuStrike rounds. Maybe they're knockoffs, who knows? If you're looking for a better source of darts, check the link down in the description box below. I've got you. They'll fly straighter and be less expensive. But we've gone ahead and set the target in Elite Standard mode, which is to say, it's 20 feet away. We should be able to put something downrange. Wow, this is actually, the aperture is too low to fit in there. So we're just gonna kind of ballpark it. 1, 2. Hey. So mod guide, guys. For 30 bucks, it's a solid platform. If you don't already have a semi-auto Springer, I think that this is a really good option at a very fair price. But to be really, truly excited about this in the way that I'm excited about it, we got to crack it. We got to take it apart. We got to see what makes it tick, and we've got to kind of start designing new parts for it. We're going to have to put lipos in it, completely new set of wheels. I think that it's safe to say we are using just straight up stock Hasbro wheels, same mold, and kind of convert the entire thing into a powerful semi-auto flywheel master race blaster exhibit thing. So that's my review. My stock review is that this one does get a thumbs up. It's a fair price. It's an interesting shell, but it's important to remember that, like, the things that we like about the Strike are tainted with nostalgia. The Stryfe is an ugly asymmetrical blaster. This is an ugly asymmetrical blaster, but it's got this very tactical feel, particularly with the accessories off, that I think has a lot of merits. Let's take it apart. Let's see what's going on in the mod guide. Until then, if you'd like to pick one up, I'll throw a link to it on Walmart down in the description box below. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Much love. Blast on. Drac out.